Well, what's up, guys? Chris Brown from Train Boston coming at you with another wellness moment. Today, I want to ask you another question. What is your chain made of? In previous wellness moments, I've talked to you about wellness and bettering yourself and working on goals. So, one of the problems with that can be, is your goal working towards what you actually want? Is your goal going to make yourself better in the entirety of your life? Dan John poses that question very often. That got me thinking about what my principles are. Pat Davidson also recently brought this to my mind, and many other very smart people in the industry talk about it all the time. One of the things that they all mention is you must sit down and write down your principles, write down what you're made of, write down what you want to do and why. Be very detail oriented. So today we're going to look at that. Whether you call it a pillar, a pyramid, a bucket, or a Venn diagram, we're going to have you guys learn how you can go through your goals, go through what you're doing, and see whether it's actually working for you. I'm going to give you examples of what I personally do for wellness, and you can take that and work off of it and rip off it yourself. So I said earlier, is what you're doing bettering yourself? Ultimately, is it going to lead to a better you in the future? I usually tell people what most people want is to be happy. So you can kind of ask yourself, is this going to make me happy ultimately? Unfortunately, that's pretty hard to tell. It's an intangible thing. Happiness is really hard to quantify. So there's no way of really knowing that unless you can travel through time. But what we can do is we can try to work through a very quantifiable measurement and identify what is good for what we're trying to do and try to fit it into those parts. Okay. So in my wellness chain, I mentioned a chain, I have a couple different parts which I think have to be taken care of in order for a person to be well. And so I'm going to run you through each one of those things and kind of give you examples of how I would ascertain whether a goal I have or whether what I'm doing is working towards or working in the right direction. The first thing I talk about, not necessarily in any order here, but the first thing I usually talk to people about is what I call a nervous system wellness. And as I've talked to you in the previous wellness moment, nervous system has two parts, is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. One being amped up, ready to fight or flight. The other one being rest and refuel. Okay. And both of those are going to be used in wellness, as I said before. The parasympathetic is probably more what people think of as wellness. It's the rest, the recovery, it's sleep, it's eating, it's meditation, all that kind of stuff. But also it's important to be using the sympathetic nervous system often enough. You may have heard the concepts eustress or EU stress versus distress. If not, eustress is good stress. It's enough stress that you're going to be able to grow from it. We can talk about that in a physical sense. Stress on a bone makes it grow thicker. Or you can talk about it in a mental stress. If you tax people to learn new tasks, it's a little bit stressful, but ultimately the neurons in their brain grow. They get a little stronger and better at doing the same thing over and over again, right? Distress is when you get to the point where you can't handle it. Some people are getting that way right now. It could be toxic or bad relationships. It could be too much of a workout. Overtraining would be considered distress as well, or injury in that sense, right? And we can measure those things or monitor those things sometimes through breathing work, through measuring your heart rate variability or HRV, and in blood work and many other things to measure that. The next thing I look at is physical wellness. And this is what probably most people in our industry look at first of all. You want to see, are you hitting all those markers of what you need? Now, there's many parts, many aspects I could talk to you about for hours on just physical fitness here, but you need to identify where your goal or what you're doing now is hitting on that list, or are you even hitting that? Many people don't even look at that in their day-to-day life. But I put under there just briefly, I put strength and conditioning. Strength, you could be looking at high threshold. You'd be looking at like 800-pound squat or whatever your 90+% repetition max is. Or you could be looking on the low end of strength. Maybe you're hitting those type 1 muscle fibers, more endurance fibers. You could be looking at power. Maybe you're an Olympic lifter. Maybe you have to explode quickly for agility work or for any kind of sport. And you could be looking for conditioning. Maybe you like to do CrossFit. Maybe you're a biker, a cyclist, or maybe you like to run distance. But those kind of things, they fit in there. Are you taking care of those things? Is that aspect of your wellness and your goal being hit? Is it being taken care of? And which one do you need more of? I don't know. What's your homeostasis? So I'm not telling you what you should be doing so much as bringing this to your attention. Okay. The next part I look at is restorative movement and what I also call passive wellness. Restorative movement is yoga. It could be Tai Chi. It could be going for a walk or a light swim. Generally, when I say this isn't it's not an exercise thing. You're doing it for wellness and for mental capacity to feel good. And then I also kind of group in the passive wellness there. That could be getting a massage. It could be going to the doctor, dentist. It could be manipulation through a chiropractor or your physical therapist, etc. Those things are all very important. If you're not doing some form of those two things, you're probably not hitting every link of your chain towards wellness. The next part here is nutritional, and I like to throw hydration in there, but nutritional and hydration wellness. This, again, it's a huge topic. It's vast. I'm not going to go into it, but are you paying attention to your nutrition? Do you know what you're eating? Do you even understand anything about nutrition? We could just go into it real quickly, but macronutrition. Are you getting the proper amount of protein, carbohydrates, fats? Many people don't get enough protein. They're getting all carbohydrates and fats for the most part, and much of it is processed, so it's not really all that healthy. Do you know whether that's the case or not? And then the micro. Are you getting the right amount of vitamins and minerals? Is there the right supplementation if you're not? Usually the question I ask people is, are you getting fruits and vegetables? If you're getting a lot of colors, a lot of variety in fruits and vegetables, then you're probably doing okay. If not, why not? You have to analyze these things and make sure you at least understand. The first step is realizing and looking at it critically. Are you doing what you should be doing? Are you even close? And then you can start to figure out whether what you're doing is working towards wellness or not. And another big thing on nutrition could be timing. A lot of people don't think of timing, but timing is actually important for a lot of things here on this wellness checklist. But I won't get too deep into it. But one of the bigger things I've learned about recently is the timing as it relates to sleep. And another thing I'm delving into is timing for women specifically in regards to menses and when they should do things or not do things, or when they're more optimized to do it. So that's a big thing to think about for your nutritional and hydration wellness. The next category I put, and I just mentioned it gets its own category, is sleep. You could generate this and say it's recovery as a whole. I like to give sleep its own category because I feel as though it's that important. Sleep has many things that are important about it. If you don't get good sleep, you're probably not going to be doing well in these other categories. Right? So it's exceptionally important to look at. Now, within sleep, you can look at your quantity, which is what most people use alone to say whether they're sleeping well or not. But I like to delve into quantity, quality, and even timing of sleep, and then managing outside factors. So I just recently learned a lot from Nick Lambie. His circadian lever concept is what I'm kind of bouncing off here. Is those outside factors. Are you getting a lot of blue light from screens, or lights from your overhead lights at night before you sleep? That kind of light exposure at night is going to affect your hormones and affect how you sleep. Another thing is, is there a lot of noise around you? Do you live on a main road? Do you have noisy neighbors, that kind of thing? And then also the temperature of the room is another factor. Is it around 68 degrees? Are you in an apartment that doesn't have good insulation like myself? And is it the quality of your bed where it should be? There's a lot of different factors. But Stuart McGill actually, in that same recovery summit of Nick Lambie, was talking about the types of beds with the types of body types you might have. And if it doesn't work for you and you have pain after sitting in one position for a while, you're not going to get good quality sleep. Even though you may feel like you slept for a long time, that sleep may be fragmented, may not be so good. And I'll probably get into sleep as a whole in another wellness moment here, but that's a big one. And if you're not getting any quality sleep, you're not going to be hitting those other chains very well. And then the last one I hit on is mental and psychological wellness. Now, this is really, really often overlooked, and along with sleep, but even more so this one. And I think it's a travesty. We need to be working on this a lot more. The first thing I considered, because what I'm doing right now, is education, and specifically education as an adult. Kids are forced to go to school whether they like it or not, and they're constantly learning. Our brains are developing even past our teens into our early, maybe even mid-20s. So they don't really have a choice, but we have to make ourselves continue education. Some professions have that as a requirement, but many do not. And it doesn't have to be education specific to what you're doing for your job right now. This is just good for your wellness. It's preventative against diseases like Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases as well. But it just makes you feel good, and it challenges you. It puts you into that eustress area where you're going to grow. We don't ever really want to be in a position where we're not growing, because after a certain point in our life, we start going the other direction, and nobody wants that. Another category under this, or another part of this category, is play and hobbies. Revisit what you used to love as a kid. You'll find that you wonder why you ever stopped doing it. Maybe you need to find time for this. Maybe you need to schedule it. Or maybe you should involve your significant other or your kids in that same hobby and see if you can't rekindle that happiness that you had. I also pair this with go outside. Like, get on the ground, crawl around, get dirty, go, do things your kid used to love to do. The kid you. Get on a bike, get on a skateboard, get scrapes and bruises. Don't be afraid of things. That kind of thing will really enhance your mood. And speaking of mood, laughter. Laughter is medicine. You may have heard that. Patch Adams was a very good movie if you're at least as old as I am. And it's totally true. I don't want to get into the science behind that. I'm definitely not the person to talk to on that. But a lot of professionals will talk about laughter and say it's definitely it's medicine. Have fun. Fun is really important. If you're not having fun with what you're doing ever, you may want to revisit what you're doing while you're doing it. It's okay to not always have fun for sure, but we need to be having fun every once in a while. And then mindfulness and meditation. I talked about this in the last two wellness moments, so I don't need to beat this to death, but you should be thinking about why you're doing something and what you're feeling when you're doing it. Every single time we're doing it right now, we're analyzing what are you doing and why? What am I feeling when I'm doing it? Is this a good stress? Is this a bad stress? Is this too much or too little? Do I feel my hips or do I feel my knees? Is this pain or is it mild discomfort? Those kind of things are really important to parse through, sit down and talk to. And that kind of leads into the next part is your relationships. So sometimes you can't figure out whether you're in the right area or not, head in the right direction or not. It's important to have relationships in your life to help figure that out. Now, that relationship could be your significant other. It could be your friends. It could be your doctor or your trainer or your therapist. But I also mean your professional relationships in that sometimes, many times, I know for me it's true, I need somebody who's more specialized, who's smarter than I am. I want to be surrounded with people who are smarter than I am, or at least on par, or have a different specialty than myself. First of all, I don't want to tell someone the wrong thing. I want to refer out every single time if I do not feel like I have a good handle on it, or if it's not legally appropriate. And they, in the very least, even if they're the same expertise as you, they can give you a different perspective, a different view. Sometimes they'll tell you, they'll make you feel uncomfortable and tell you you sound like an idiot. Or I disagree and here's why. And it's tough sometimes to palate that, but ultimately it will make you into a better professional. All right. So coming back, we're going to wrap up here. We're going to circle back to the chain here. I use the metaphor of a chain and what your chain is made of. And I like to recap what all those chain links are, at least what mine are. and help you define what your chain is going to be. So mine was a wellness chain. It's just a chain of wellness links. Not a perfect analogy. Don't worry about it. Don't overthink it. We're just trying to put something out there for you to work with. But my wellness chain has a nervous system wellness, physical fitness, restorative movement and passive wellness, nutritional and hydration wellness, sleep wellness, and mental and psychological wellness. All right. Now, that chain doesn't mean only experiencing good things or only experiencing things that make you feel good. Again, we're talking about eustress, which is a good level of stress, and then distress. We want to stay in that eustress. We want it to feel a little uncomfortable. We want it to feel hard and difficult. We want to feel like, hey, I don't want to be doing this, but not so much that you have a mental breakdown or you physically break down, right? Unlike normal chains, our chain, maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but our chain probably functions more like neurons in the brain. The links can shrink, they can get thicker. You can add links if you really feel like you need to, or maybe you can take them out. And they need to be able to move, just like a chain link. So let's take that chain link analogy and move a little further with it. So first of all, the chain links, we want to look at them in this way. We want to say which one of our chain links is weak, right? We want it to move well, but we don't want it to be so reinforced that it's too thick and cannot move, right? Which one of those chain links is, one of those links might be weak. Which one doesn't need to be reinforced, okay? When we put it under heavy stress, is it going to break? But maybe that same link could be too thick. Maybe we're using one of these things too much, okay? And it's too thick to actually move well. If that's the case, maybe we need to take some of our time away from one of those parts and put it into the other. For instance, maybe I'm worried too much about my nutrition. I'm scrutinizing every bit of my macronutrients, and I'm not at all taking time to maybe work out, which isn't typical. But maybe I'm not spending any time with my family or my relationships. Maybe I'm not being mindful. Maybe I don't have time for work. So we want to make sure that while they need to be strong, they're not too thick, they're not too overused, because it still needs to be able to move and be pliable, right? Do we have too few links? Maybe we haven't looked at everything that's really important. Maybe we need to add a link there so we can have more sway in our chain. Do we have too many chains? Are we trying to worry about too many things all at once? Is our chain dragging on the ground? Or are you tripping over your chain? And are we maintaining that chain? Are we looking consistently at our chain to make sure it's doing well and it's hanging right and keeping things together? So again, I always bring this back to writing things down and scheduling. So I like to look at my chain links once a month and go through and just kind of self-assess. Again, having that relationship a factor is important, because sometimes, especially your significant others, will be like, hey, you're an idiot, you missed this. And that helps you go back and reassess and maybe reapply that to your chain. I call that person an emotional spotter. Do you have an emotional spotter? If you don't, you got to go back to that chain. You got to look at your psychological and mental wellness and find an emotional spotter. Find out whether you're doing all these things. All right. So let's take that and find your own chain. Sit down, look at your goals, and look at what you're doing and see, does it hit every one of my chain links? Is it really working towards making this chain link stronger? Again, you can use buckets, you can use pyramids or Venn diagrams, whatever you want. But you have to write down your principles, your rules, what you want to achieve, what you really care about when it all comes down to it. And every time you make a goal or every time you try to do something, you can look back at that list you put out on paper and say, hey, does it work towards this? Does it work towards that? Does it work towards this? And that's a very quantifiable way to look at something. And if you're hitting all those things, or if it generally works that way, you're more likely to have these more intangible goals or more intangible things you want to work out. All right, guys. So please let me know how it goes. I would love to see if some of you wrote this down and went through this. Give me some examples, give me some questions, maybe teach me something. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Press that bell button. And we'll see you next time. Until next time, be well. Thank you very much.